Shackleton. Is there any member of the public who wants to address the board on a matter that's not on the agenda? Then I'd like a motion to approve the agenda.
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Robbins, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Beecham.
President White, managers, I'm very happy to be here this evening to introduce the newest member of our permitting staff, Erin Manlick. She's joining us from Wisconsin. She just moved back to the Twin Cities area this past May, and rather than have me give you all the details, I'll let Erin take it from here.
President, managers, thank you for having me here tonight. Just to give you a little introduction, a little about myself. As Tom said, I'm from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Moved to the Twin Cities area for my bachelor's degree, where I went to the University of Minnesota, studied fisheries and wildlife and conservation biology. Then I did my master's degree at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in environmental conservation. So my previous work includes bird monitoring research in Florida, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I did AAS inspections for the Minneapolis Park Board. And most recently, I was office manager for the Natural Resources Foundation of Wisconsin, which is fundraising for conservation projects throughout the state of Wisconsin. I'm excited to be working for the district. Looking forward to spreading awareness about natural resource conservation in the area and using education to supplement regulations and enforcement in the permitting department. So thank you for having me here.
Welcome.
Well,
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Good luck.
Great.
The consent agenda has approval of the October 11, 2018 board minutes and approval of the check registers, the general checking account, the surety account, and the 325 Blake Road checking account. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Manager Shackleton, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Olson, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I have two items to report. Sorry about the bump there. A few days ago, or recently, Joel Carlson came in. James Whisker and Manager Shackleton and I met with him to start the conversation about the 2019 legislative session. So he will be available for us to run the MWAD resolutions by him before we take action to direct our voting members on those. And we'll schedule an executive committee after the election, and then in January, Mr. Carlson will come to the board so we can talk about priorities and our approach and what we might expect to happen this session. So that is underway. I attended Metro Mod, and Becky Christopher was there as well. The bulk of the meeting was taken up with a report on the Metro watershed-based funding with its goal of long-term, I'm quoting Kevin Bagalki here, long-term, stable, predictable funding approach. The next step is a forum in November, and James Whisker and Becky Christopher are taking pitch hitting. They're both responsible for being on this group of people who are taking this next step forward. So that's good. Manager Miller, anything about your committee?
Very informative presentation we had on the strategic action plan. It's the laying out the expectations of the surrounding strategic action plan. It'd be good if I could say that well. Its format and implementation, as well as we discussed the status and next steps of the plan and implementing it. It's very comprehensive, and it is going to be a very interesting development over the next year and a half or so.
Thank you. Manager Shackleton?
On the south side of the creek over by Lake Nokomis, there's been persistent high water in the surrounding neighborhoods, and our organization has partnered with the DNR, the City of Minneapolis Park Board, USGS, I forget whom else. Last night, and Hennepin County, yes. And last night there was a public meeting, open house format for anybody that's interested. And probably we had 3 or 4 staff present, and I was there for a couple hours, and I'd say about 40 people came through. I walked in not expecting the turnout that was present and was sustained for a good hour and a half. It was just an opportunity for residents to come in and ask questions. There were a lot of cards up, poster boards up, and the state's climatologist was present and was demonstrating how water moves through different strata of sediment, and it was a really fascinating open house, and there was a good energy present for something that where people showed up because they have wet basements. So.
Thank you. Are there other meetings or events managers have attended would like to report on? The upcoming schedule in the agenda, that's the word I want, includes the November CAC, which I'm assigned, and meetings November 8th and 15th. As a reminder, we're crunching those together because of the holidays. And then we can move on to our business items. We have permit 18501 for cart management. Ms. Showalter.
Thank you, President White, managers. I'm going to be presenting this evening on permit 18501, which is the 6 Mile Creek cart barriers. Since I believe managers are fairly familiar with this project, I'm going to go a little quickly. Just going through the brief project overview, the rules, and then end with a staff recommendation. So as the managers are well aware, there are 3 different locations of proposed cart barriers. The plan sheets are nearly identical for each of them. It's the same construction method, so I'm just going to be talking about the Highland Road barrier, but the same applies to, right? So the barriers are constructed of a metal grate with chain link fencing on either side, and there'll be a concrete base that is placed into the bed of the creek. So this project is regulated under the erosion control rule due to the level of disturbance. The applicant has submitted a thorough erosion control plan, including both in-water and upland erosion control devices, as well as a stabilization plan. Because some of the disturbance may take place within wetland area, the applicant also applied for a no-loss determination for temporary wetland impacts, which was approved upon recommendation by the technical evaluation panel. The barriers themselves are regulated under the Water Body Crossings and Structures Rule, and the applicant has requested 2 exceptions, which I will go into a little bit further later. The primary remaining criteria of the Water Body Crossings Rule is minimal impact and public benefit. The applicant submitted an alternatives analysis, which I think all of you are quite aware of, the analysis that went into determining this as the appropriate design, as well as statement of public benefit of the habitat restoration that will be achieved through this design that would not be possible with temporary barriers or without doing any sort of barrier. The barriers will have riprap placed at the base of the barriers to discourage carp from trying to burrow under and disturbing the sediments. That riprap is regulated under the Shoreline and Stream Bank Stabilization Rule. For water courses, the appropriate stabilization method is determined by the shear stress equation, which is taking essentially dimensions of the stream. In this case, the carp are not considered in that equation, and so the applicant requested design flexibility to allow the use of hard armoring when otherwise it would not be allowed based on the shear stress alone. And staff feels that that the carp do represent a potential for erosion, and that use of the stabilization is warranted, and recommend granting design flexibility. The project also involves disturbance in the floodplain, but any fill that is placed will be below the ordinary high water level of the water courses, and therefore is not subject to mitigation requirements. Mitigation is only required between the ordinary high water level and the 100-year, not below the ordinary high. And so no further mitigation was required for that. Moving into the two exceptions, exceptions may be granted by the Board of Managers when the board finds that a greater natural resource benefit is afforded by the proposal instead of strict following of the rules. So the first exception that was requested is from the wildlife passage requirement of the rule. Water body crossings are required to maintain upland and aquatic wildlife passage. The goal of this project is to prohibit aquatic passage of carp, and therefore it does not meet that criteria. But the spirit of the rule most likely not to ensure that carp are able to migrate. And so that is the first exception, which I think is fairly straightforward. The applicant has provided a plan as far as how passage of other animals will take place, either by allowing for northern pike to migrate prior to carp migration, or assistance provided to other animals by helping them over the grades that's needed.
How will that occur? How will that occur?
Staff from the Research and Monitoring Department will be visiting the barrier sites, and through, so turtles will be transferred by net, and other species of fish that are too large to fit through the grates, they use an electrofishing backpack.
Will turtles amass?
That's not anticipated. There just might be a frustrated turtle now and then.
Do they vote?
Go ahead.
May I ask you?
Sorry.
Manager Olson.
I see the two barriers. Can you show me the direction that they're working? In other words, where are the fish coming from and where will they be stopped? Go back one more. There we go.
Okay.
Let's start with Halstead's Bay.
Okay. So I'm actually going to call on Anna or Brian.
Manager Olson, so let's see. On the, can you do the laser pointer?
There we go.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay, so Halsted Bay is this way. So in the spring, carp are primarily moving from Halsted Bay, so we'll encounter the barrier here. As we discussed through the design approval and then the contract award, this barrier is not being constructed at this time. So for now, it will just be the one barrier in place. But then in the fall, carp will then migrate from Mud Lake back to Halsted Bay. So both sides of the barrier will be used. And depending on, how much they sort of just congregate on their own without the other barrier in place, we may be able to do some removal here just in the stream channel using that backpack shocker.
Okay, so if you're looking at this picture, one of the barriers is being built and it blocks the direction both ways. It's not letting something through and not back or any kind of an approach like that.
No, it'll completely block the channel both directions.
Go ahead.
All right. And so the other requested exception is for the hydraulic capacity portion of the water body crossings rule. So for water courses, hydraulic structures are not allowed to increase the flood stage, which means the 100-year flood elevation. Because of the design of the structures, the applicant will be increasing the flood stage, both for Lake Wasserman and for this small portion of 6 Mile Creek between Highway 7 and Highland Road. So the increase in Wasserman will be 4/100ths of a foot, so pretty imperceivable.
Under what flow regime? Under what flow regime? Like a normal flow regime, or?
That's the 100-year.
100-year.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Highland Road barrier will result in 0.17 feet increase in the flood elevation, and so the applicant has demonstrated that they meet the no-rise criteria from the DNR, and so in these areas there is not an established flood elevation under FEMA. Our modeling obviously determined a flood elevation. And in areas where there isn't an established flood elevation, so long as the increase does not result in any potential damage to structures or an additional inclusion of parcels in the floodplain, it is considered to meet no-rise criteria. The applicant submitted analysis of aerial photos showing the current and proposed location of the floodplain. So the red line is the existing flood elevation, and the blue line is the proposed. No additional structures in that small little bit of land, and so there isn't any risk to private property. And the applicant has also demonstrated that, the rise in flood stage was minimized to the greatest extent feasible, and that the increase, the habitat restoration benefit afforded just in their opinion, justifies an exception from the rule to allow for this small increase in flood elevation. And so with that, if the managers find sufficient grounds to grant an exception, staff recommends approval of the permit, subject to conditions listed in the permit report.
Thank you, Ms. Showalter. Mr. Smith, would you recommend that I have a motion on the exception first? Is there a motion to approve the exception?
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Brogdon, any questions or discussion on the exception?
This is on, this is on the,
On the exception, which is for the
The,
floodplain?
for wildlife passage and for flood stage.
so I want to get back to the wildlife passage, because I did have some additional questions. In Arden Park, we talked about doing a passage for smaller animals, inclusive of fish, and blocking off the full flow, and with this structure seems like it would provide an impediment. And I think, my sense is, we're not going to send staff out to pick up the random turtle or the random animals that may want to go up and downstream. And how would this not be an impediment to more than just carp?
Thank you, Manager Shackleton, President White. So the barriers themselves are not going to prevent the passage of most species of fish. So most fish will be able to fit between the bars, since carp are pretty large fish. So a large amount of wildlife will be able to pass as they currently do. It's just larger species, so the northern pike would have a challenge getting through, and that's why the adjustable grates will be able to be operated in a way to allow northern pike to reach and return from spawning areas.
I think that was well covered. The primary purpose of the grates is, as Elizabeth said, are to sort of facilitate migration of larger fish. And I think that the level of sort of manual management by our staff will be dependent on sort of what we're seeing in the field. If it is, a stray turtle now and then, we're not necessarily going to help every animal pass. But if we are seeing times of the year where critters are accumulating, we'll facilitate that movement, either by, again, using the removable grate when carp aren't present in a channel, or by some of our other tools like the backpack shocker.
So I wasn't clear in the Arden Park example how mammals and invertebrates would necessarily would know to use this passage, but we were assured that it was something that would function and that would serve its purpose to allow the passage of animals in a way that would meet our rules. And would something like that not be valuable in this case?
I'm not very familiar with what is proposed in Arden, but the concern would be how do you sort of differentially sort for carp versus other species, and there isn't necessarily a size that we could say, if you're under this large, you can pass. So I think to be safe, make sure that carp aren't moving into the system, we have to prevent carp of all sizes passage and sort of see what happens in the field.
Do you have any guidance on this? Because it was,
Manager Shackleton, managers, so with Arden, the big thing was getting a velocity to come up around the side because we had the hydraulic grade that came through. These will also have an ability, the velocities will be much slower, and then they'll also have an ability to get overland flow. So if you have a turtle, it'll still be able to find its way around on land, so it can actually get up and across.
okay.
So to the point of, we will monitor it. We don't anticipate impingement of any animals against this because it's so wide and it's actually a backwater from the lake, so the velocities are really slow. So we have great confidence that they'll be able to move around the side and then move down if they want to move down or move up. The other thing with Arden too is 54th Avenue was right there, and the concern was getting them up and over. So with this, they'll still be able to move within the channel and then around the barrier on land outside of the roads.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Other questions? All those in favor of granting the exception, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now, may I have a motion to approve the permit with the exceptions as approved?
So moved.
Manager Rodriguez, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Olson, questions on the permit? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Showalter.
One last question. How do you lift the grate? What's our mechanical solution to lifting the grate for the northern pass?
Ms. Brown.
We're designing a pulley system to help lift the grate, so it'll be kind of a movable pulley system that can move onto the 3 different barriers. It'll be similar to a dock pole.
Like a winch or something? Or
Gym membership.
Mr. Mann.
Manager Olson, it'd be very similar to docks, when you put the docks in, a lot of them have pulleys.
Yep.
That allow you to raise and lower.
Yep.
So each grade, each post will have settings for the pulleys to be put in place so they can be moved.
the portable pulleys and you just pull it up?
Pull it up and then that.
Put a
way
pin
it's-
in?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
We'll move to item 10.2, permit 18-535 for Pamela Park in Minnetonka, and we have Michelle Walterkin.
Thank you, President White, managers. So this permit is fairly straightforward, and it's only before the Board of Managers because of a policy of the board to consider permits on the public record that are being granted to itself. So I'm just going to give a brief project overview and then go into the rules. So this project, it refers to the removal of sediment, of accumulated sediment from 2 stormwater ponds that are part of district capital projects. The first is the Damecosta Pond Cell 1, and then the second is Pamela Park Pond Cell Pond 2, which is being done in partnership with the City of Edina. Because these are not public waters, this project is not regulated under the dredging rule, and it's only regulated for erosion control. And so the permitting requirements are just subject to ensuring that there is proper perimeter control, appropriate construction entrances, as well as a stabilization plan. And so native vegetation will be used where appropriate, and then adjacent to roadways, a low maintenance turf seed will be used. And so all of the required elements of the erosion control rule have been met, so staff recommends approval of the permit.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Manager Shackleton, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognes, any questions for Ms. Showalter? Manager Shackleton?
Is this timeline, has this been accelerated? Like in that, there's a management plan for these two water bodies and that, or facilities, and just strikes me as off, unless I'm just forgetting it.
Yeah, thank you, Manager Shackleton, managers. So I think that is a question that Jana would likely be able to answer as she presents the authorization to award contracts later in this evening. I do not know the answer to your question.
Okay.
Mr. Mann?
Or, could she do it?
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Certainly, President White, Manager Shackleton. We are actually on the proposed timeline that we set forth in June and July meetings, and I will further detail where we're at in further resolutions in this meeting.
Great. I recall discussing it back then. I just didn't, in my mind, it wasn't coming up.
We may be bidding a little bit earlier than previous dredging projects have been done in the past. I believe the one in 2015 didn't go out to bid until November. Okay. So we may be ahead in that respect, but the project timeline is still just for this winter.
Okay. I just didn't, wasn't in my mind as happening this winter, so.
It is.
Manager Miller?
We do have a regular scheduled inspection of all the capital improvement projects that entail dredging, so I'm sure it's just it came up.
I believe that. I wasn't, I mean, I know sometimes they take on additional sediment than they were built for. And I thought this may have occurred here. I know it's occurred a couple other places.
The Damacoska is a very productive pond, so it was dredged last in the winter of 2011, 2012. Okay. So again, it may seem like it's coming up faster than some other ponds, and that is true just because it does have a large drainage area that it takes on.
When you say productive, does that imply that there's sediment that's flowing that is not being retained upstream?
No, that it is accumulating sediment, a lot of sediment, so it is bringing it to the stormwater pond, and it is serving its function in that respect.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 11.1, Resolution 18-108. Ms. Brown.
Thank you, President White and managers. I have two resolutions before the board tonight, and I'm going to sort of run the presentations one after another. The first is to award the contract for barrier construction, and then the second is to approve 2 easements and an agreement to provide the land rights for those barrier facilities.
Why wouldn't we get the land rights contract approved first and then award the contract? It's not an important question, but it just seems like it's one that was begging to be asked.
I can do the approvals in that order when we come to it.
Okay.
So the barriers that we're looking at tonight are in 3 locations. There's the Highland Road barrier between Mud Lake and Halstead Bay, the Crown College barrier, which is at that tributary to Parley Lake, and then in the south, the Wasserman barrier, which is at the outlet of Lake Wasserman. The design for these barrier facilities was approved on September 27th. And at that meeting, staff were also authorized to solicit quotes. This is an example of the barrier design, which we also saw in Ms. Showalter's presentation. Both Crown College and Wasserman barriers are pretty simple design. And then the Highland Road is a bit more complicated, but builds from the same building blocks. So following the September 27th meeting, staff solicited quotes for the barriers that following week. We solicited quotes from 3 contractors and received 2 responses from Blackstone Contractors and Sunram. The board will note that the barriers did come in higher than what was estimated by the engineer. This is likely driven by a variety of factors that include the material cost as well as the bidding climate. Staff are proposing to absorb the increase in cost, first and foremost by working with the contractor who receives the award to value engineer the design and see if we can't realize some cost savings by making some modifications to what's proposed. And then secondly, the board will recall that the barriers are being funded through the Lessard Sams grant program, and we are evaluating budget adjustments through the grant that would shift more costs into the capital infrastructure piece and move that away from the contracts that are allocated to fish removal. With that shift, the carp removal piece is a little more adaptive and a little bit sort of learning as we go. So it might be that we can sort of absorb that budget reduction and that we can still get the removals done. But we also may have to consider budgeting through the district budget process in out years to sort of supplement some of those removal contracts. So for this, the staff are proposing that we award the contract to Blackstone Contractors as the low bidder, and the price adjustments that we can realize through value engineering will be managed with the contractor through change orders. So we are requesting that it's awarded at that the total quote amount of approximately $170,000.
Ms. Brown, if you'll just continue with your presentation on the land rights.
Absolutely. So the second piece of the approval are the land rights agreements for these barriers. There are 3 total agreements for 2 sites that are being requested for approval tonight. And the Crown College site, the agreement with Crown College is still under development. We're still working with the landowners. So that will come back to the board when we reach agreement there. But for the agreements that we have tonight, there are 2 agreements that pertain to the Highland Road barrier. The first is an agreement with the city of Minnetrista, which is an encroachment agreement. Highland Road is a dedicated plat easement, so the city of Minnetrista's right-of-way is encompassed in an easement. It's not fee ownership. So that encroachment agreement essentially assigns the easement rights that Minnetrista holds to the district non-exclusively, so that we now share in those easement rights for the purpose of barrier construction, maintenance, and fish removal. And then we've also developed an easement with the owner of the underlying land rights, which is the adjacent property Creekview Investment, which similarly allows for installation, operations and maintenance, and fish removal. And then the third agreement is for the Wasserman barrier. It's an easement with the Waterbrook Fellowship, structured very similarly to what we have with Creekview Investment. The only sort of nuance in their proposal is that they requested a right to relocate after 10 years in the case that the barrier conflicts with a specific campus improvement or development, which is a very low risk. It's unlikely that the barrier in the channel were to conflict with something in the future. So again, the basic provisions there are that it allows for the installation, operations, and maintenance. And for all of these agreements, there are no responsibilities assigned to the grantors, so the district is responsible for all of those, for performing all of those tasks. And with that, I can take any questions.
So first of all, may I have a motion to adopt Resolution 18109, which is the execution, right, authorization to execute land right agreements for the cart barrier installation.
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Shackleton. Any questions, Manager Olson?
What is the life expectancy of these barriers?
So with any sort of capital project like this, they're designed for a 30-year lifespan. The idea is that they're permanent improvements and should, parts and pieces have to be replaced. But the idea is that these are permanent structures.
Okay, so in the event of that 10-year change in campus, how involved is it is that barrier lost or is that barrier salvageable?
Salvageable. I mean, the only piece that would have to be sort of relayed would be the footing structure.
Okay.
And I don't know whether those, it would probably be sort of examining the site to figure out whether those pieces are salvageable, but the grates, the fencing, the main sort of elements are not.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Then we'll move to the other item. And is there a motion to adopt resolution 18108 to award the construction contract for the cart barriers?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Shackleton?
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. Smith.
wanted to raise the question with Ms. Brown. If the Crown College access isn't attained, would you recommend that the notice to proceed and the construction contract be altered accordingly?
Yes, Mr. Smith. Yeah, we would have to alter the notice to proceed. We could be in a situation where there's a lag time where the other barriers are ready to proceed, and we have to hold off on the Crown College barrier, and we would manage that accordingly.
So, Madam President, I'm just wondering, in light of that, the last paragraph that says, be it further resolved that before the district administrator issues a notice to proceed, district staff will advise the board on the design adjustments. Could we also add a clause and the status of the Crown College land rights so that we make an adjustment in the contract and the notice accordingly?
Say the language again.
That district staff will further advise the board on the status of Crown College land rights and recommend any adjustment to the contract accordingly.
Move that amendment to the resolution.
Had I gotten yes, I had.
You want it as an amendment to the resolution, or?
Amendment, yes.
Manager Shackleton moves the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Miller, discussion or questions? Those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we are back. We have before us the motion to adopt the resolution. Any further questions or discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Smith. Resolution, item 11.3 is resolution 18-110, authorization to execute cooperative agreement with the City of Edina for Pamela Park maintenance. Ms. Jonley and Ms. Schaufler.
President White, fellow managers, tonight I bring forward Resolution 18110, authorization to execute a cooperative agreement with the City of Edina for Pamela Park maintenance. In May 2018, sediment surveys of our stormwater records identified the need for maintenance in Pamela Park Cell 1 as a reduction in 59% wet volume was lost. After recommending stormwater pond maintenance dredging to the City of Edina, other maintenance needs in Pamela Park were identified, and a partnership was proposed to make a number of improvements in Pamela Park. At the June 28th, 2018 meeting, the board directed staff to pursue this partnership with the City of Edina and develop the terms of a cooperative agreement. The proposed cooperative agreement outlines 3 project elements: the dredging of Pamela Park Cell 1, repairing the failed wall adjacent to the outfall 36, which outlets into Cell 1, and the development of a vegetation management plan for the entirety of Pamela Park. The new cooperative agreement details that the City of Edina will reimburse the district for the dredging and outfall wall repair, work associated engineering costs and the preparation of the vegetation plan. Lastly, the new cooperative agreement defines operations and maintenance details, which the 2000 cooperative agreement did not. The 2018 cooperative agreement supersedes the previous agreement and clarifies the district's and the city's future responsibilities for maintenance in Pamela Park. Edina City Council approved the maintenance project cooperative agreement at its October 16th, 2018 meeting. Therefore, staff recommends the board take final action to authorize the execution of a cooperative agreement with the City of Edina for the Pamela Park Pond Maintenance Project.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Did I cut you off? I apologize if I did. I have a motion and second to adopt the resolution. Any questions, Manager Olson?
59%, I just find that an enormous loss of water volume.
It was constructed, Manager Olson, it was constructed in 2000 and has never been managed.
Okay,
So it's 18 years.
then what are we going to do with, what is done now with what we pull out of there?
It's contaminated sediment, so it will be hauled to an appropriate facility. There are, I think, 3 or more in the metro area that accept industrial contaminated.
Is it a burning facility?
No, it's a leach line,
Oh, they're gonna, okay,
landfill.
all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
You know, in course of this, last, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, the Edina City engineer was at my house because I got a easement problem and flowage problem with the stormwater. And after we were done, I told him that I was on the watershed creek, and he went on for like 3 minutes on how great the water. This is an engineer, mind you. I mean, they're not, how great we were to work with, and how pleased he was with the change in direction that we've taken. And he says it's just a joy with. I don't think he would use the word joy, but it was a pleasure working with the district, and he said it didn't used to be. So I thought I'd pass that on to the board because engineers usually don't give compliments out to natural resource groups.
Do you have any statistics to support that?
Yeah,
They also don't like hugs.
it's alternative truth.
I've lost track. Are we ready to vote, folks? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, sir.
Yes, I've got a quick question. My wife and I live right across the street from these ponds, and so they're very near and dear to our hearts, especially with wildlife that comes in and uses them. What's the status of the other 2 ponds? Have they lost a lot of wet volume, and are there plans to dredge those as well?
Go ahead.
Pond 2 cell 2 was also surveyed, and I don't remember exactly, but I believe it was somewhere around 39%. However, the importance of maintaining the first cell is basically cell 2 and cell 3 are overflows. So once cell 1 achieves a 50% reduction, it starts overflowing into cell 2. So if you keep maintaining cell 1 appropriately, you may never have to dredge cell 2 or cell 3. And so also as part of just, the construction contract and the new agreement we have, there will be restoration work done. So you will see some, clearing and grubbing of miscellaneous brush and trees, but then the end result should be a much prettier, better habitat for wildlife. That should result.
Thank you for your question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I missed a cue here, Mr. Smith.
Could we get the names?
Oh, certainly. Your name and your address, sir.
It's Doug Engelke, Engelke, 4201 Philbrook Lane. Edina.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone.
Good, thank you.
The next item is related. Thank you. Item 11.4 is Resolution 18-111, authorization to award a construction contract for the Pamela Park Cell 1 and Bidamakaska's Pond dredging. Ms. Jones.
So next I'm bringing Resolution 18-111, authorization to award a construction contract for 2018-2019 Pamela Park Cell 1 and Southwest Bidamakaska Pond dredging. As previously mentioned in May, the Stormwater Pond Sediment Surveys identified the need for maintenance of Pamela Park Cell 1. Sediment survey results also indicated the need for maintenance of Southwest Bidamakaska. At the July 12th, 2018 meeting, the board authorized the district to enter into a contract with WENC for stormwater pond maintenance engineering services and authorized the district to solicit bids for said maintenance. Prior to bid release, the district and the city of Edina agreed to accept the overall low bid for the project as a whole. Sunram Construction submitted the overall low bid in the amount of $277,925. In 2012, Sunram Construction performed the dredging maintenance at Southwest Bidamakaska for a total of $116,000. Therefore, the 2018 bid of $113,000 may be a reduction realized by decreased mobilization costs due to the proximity of the two projects. In addition, this lower cost may reflect an efficiency gain, as this would be Sunram Construction's third pond dredging project for the district in the last 6 years. City of Edina staff concurs with the district's recommendation of Sunram Construction as the overall low bidder, and per the new cooperative agreement, will reimburse the district for the alternate bid total of $164,625. Therefore, staff recommends the board take final action to authorize awarding of a construction contract to Sunram Construction for the amount of $277,925 and the establishment of a construction budget in the not-to-exceed amount of $305,717. Any questions?
Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 18-111?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Shackleton. Are there any questions? Manager Olson?
Side thing, the tennis courts I saw, are they city?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Manager Shackleton?
You know, I don't recognize Rachel Construction or Minger Construction, and honestly, Peterson Companies either. Are they new to soliciting from us?
Ms. Schaffler?
Manager Shackleton, managers. Rachel Construction did the Methodist Hospital remander work, so they've done some work. And Peterson Companies did the Amelia Pond dredging by Lake Nokomis back in 2011. So they've been around. And Minger did, I believe, the Dutch Lake Sand Iron Filter. And Paul Road.
Manager Miller?
What percent of Edina is covered with treatment facilities or ponds before it flows into the creek?
Yeah, Manager Miller, we could certainly ask City of Edina staff. I know they have a pretty robust understanding of every drop of water flows to the city, so.
Well, not only the flows, but the treatment. I know the whole country club neighborhood, when they repave that, they put treatment facilities in every place there. And in my neighborhood, they did the same thing. I'm just wondering what percent is covered.
So just to rephrase your question is, what percent of the city drains to some sort of treatment facility?
Right.
We can get, certainly
Okay,
circle
good.
back to you.
Have we voted?
No.
I've lost them. Good. Any other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Item 11.5, Resolution 18-112, Ms. Schaffler.
Thank you, President White, managers. Tonight, staff is seeking authorization to award a construction contract for the Minnehaha Creek FEMA repair project to Sunram Construction as well. I'll wait till Jana's done passing out the full bid tab.
It's much easier to read in paper.
That's great.
When you have, what was it? 80-some bid line items, it becomes busy quick. So the overall engineer's estimate for this project was $193,885. As you can see in the bid tab, the district received 5 bids. Sunram submitted the lowest qualified bid at $163,844. District staff and the design team of engineers found Sunram's bid to be responsive and responsible. Additionally, district staff has successfully contracted with Sunram in the past. They did 13 repair sites for Long Reach 8 about a decade ago, and then also helped do some of the original Minneoth Fall repair work below the Glen. So tonight, staff is requesting that the board award the Minneoth Creek FEMA repair project to Sunram Construction for an amount of $163,844 and establish a not-to-exceed construction budget of $180,228. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognus? Question?
How could one bid be off by over 100%?
Manager Miller, managers, in our experience, the two low bids on this are contractors that we work with often and are very familiar with this type of work.
Okay.
The other 3, I think we're trying to look for work and see if they could get it, but aren't necessarily people we've worked with a lot and just don't have the efficiencies that the other 2 contractors have.
Anything else? Manager Shackleton?
I mean, it's kind of a broader question than just this one contract, and I plan on voting for this, but if there are only a couple contractors that have deep experience working with us, and by virtue of that are able to submit the low bids, how do we ensure that we actually get best value if there are other contractors that could potentially provide competition but lacking the experience of continuity of contracts, aren't able to drop their rates low enough or drop their bids low enough?
Manager Shackleton, managers, I think a lot of it's just things that are out of control, current other projects they have on their plate, the bidding climate. So in some of those, sometimes you see people throw a bid and, if they happen to be the low and they're already busy, then to them it's a win-win. They're making quite a bit more extra money off of it than they anticipated. So I think in our experience, we're seeing more people coming into and bidding on our projects. At the end of the day, it comes down to just their current workload and what type of work they're looking for. I don't know if you guys have anything else.
I mean, Sunram's based on the lake, isn't it?
No, Sunram is out of Corcoran.
Okay.
And we had just heard from Ryan Sunram, their president, that they were really looking for work. So they've submitted, obviously, 2 competitive bids tonight.
Sure. Okay.
And I think in this case, we also got out ahead of a lot of other pond dredging and kind of stream lake repair projects that are coming on the pike. I've heard at the Water Resource Conference last week that other people are just putting out their bids in November, so we kind of got ahead of the curve.
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Michelle. Item 11.6 is Resolution 18-113. Mr. Heyman.
Good evening, Chair White, managers. Before you this evening with Resolution 18-113, which is for authorization to execute a contract with Wank Associates for additional environmental investigation at 325 Blake Road. You'll recall that in 2018, we were awarded an ERF grant through Hennepin County to conduct this work. It's a continued investigation based on feedback that we received from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency when we were seeking approval of our response action plan and our construction contingency plan. They had requested, or actually stated a need for additional investigation within the footprint of the building. So with that, we sought additional grant funds and were able to receive those and are now positioned to do that work with the facility being demolished. So the approval this evening is specific to that site investigation. You'll notice that there is about $5,000 of additional work outside of this particular grant approval or this contract authorization that is part of a previous grant authorization, and that's for the reporting of and revisions to the response action plan. And we do have Vite already lined up since they are on site. They're aware, and we were able to find some efficiencies in terms of cost and ability to do a couple additional test pits because they're already mobilized and have no problem just pulling a piece of equipment over and digging the pits for us. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the agreement. All funds associated with the investigation are granted and will not be an expense to the district.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 18113?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Rognus. Any questions, Mr. Heyman?
Yep.
Manager Miller?
The pulverized concrete that's on site, is that from the roadway and that's not from the building?
Manager Miller, managers, any of the concrete within the fenced area is from the building. I believe there's an additional pulverized concrete pile near Blake Road that is Eureka Constructions. We're allowing them, or Vite, I should say, who has control of the site at the moment, is allowing them to stage and store some material through the end of the contract.
But the cold storage building is not being pulverized?
All of the clean concrete foundation and footings is being crushed, turned into Class 5. You'll see a crusher on site in 2 weeks, and it'll be left on site. It's estimated to be about 20,000 tons, so it'll be a pretty significant pile that remains on site.
But the walls are being taken down and intact and hauled away?
Manager Miller, managers, that's correct. The walls are actually being taken down. They're being crushed now through the Department of Health. They reviewed the 2 different methods that Vite had proposed, and they required them to use a wet method to crush and haul away in lined containers. So you'll see a lot of trucks coming through now that have large plastic lining, and they're being lined on site. Excuse me, then filled with because within the walls is where the asbestos, the tar was. And so they're being pulverized and then loaded off that way.
Where are they being disposed of?
It's disposed of at Bonco, which is it's the same location, if I were to bet, where the sediment will end up from the contaminated pond. It's a facility actually owned, or it's a sister facility to Vite, and it's up in the Becker area.
Okay.
How much of the structure is down now?
There's only one segment of roof remaining. So if you go by there now, you'll see all of the walls are essentially exposed, and that's because they were removing all the steel and all the roof, and now they can take those walls that contain asbestos down more methodically. So they'll finish that probably within the next 10 days, and then they'll be working specifically on the concrete that is reusable and the subsurface. There is a basement for a portion of it, and that basement we will be removing all the concrete and then turning that into our temporary sediment basin while the site sits vacant.
What happened to the compressors down there?
Manager Olson, they're presently sitting out back behind the facility. They're being salvaged, but they're just waiting for pickup. There's actually a significant amount of equipment being salvaged that's just sitting waiting to be hauled away.
Okay. It's a fun project.
Yes. Any other questions, Mr. Heyman? Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move to item 13.1, which is the administrator's report. Mr. Whisker.
President White, manager, just a few notes this evening. Note number one, I'll turn on my microphone. Something regarding the Citizens Advisory Committee, the staff liaison, Darren Lochner, has pulled the existing Citizens Advisory Committee for who might be interested in reappointment. Right now, we have 4 members serving on the committee, 12 are interested in re-upping. And so one of the things that we wanted to contemplate and just float here tonight is the board comfortable reappointing those 12 members, since we're using the CAC to carry us through the next year and a half of strategic planning work? Or is this yet another year where you want to go out and advertise and bring on new members from the outside? I think staff's general perspective is we've invested a lot of time and energy this year into developing a lot of focus and competence within that group, and we could certainly go out and recruit more, but 12 is a manageable number. I think we've had it much higher in previous years, and it's not always been easily managed, and so I think with the board we've been working to get it down to a manageable size. We have 2 members leaving, 12 that are interested in carrying our strategic action plan forward. So that's just a kind of a brief point of consideration for the board, I guess.
Manager Olson.
There also is a lot of involvement they're going to do in rural changes, so consistency is an asset at this point. You don't necessarily want to do rule changes with brand new people.
I'll move that we keep those members of the Citizen Advisory Committee that want to continue to serve on for another year's appointment.
Mr. Whisker? No?
Well,
Mr. Shackleton?
I would just say that we do appointments annually, and they're typically in January. That's something that we're required to do by statute. So we're really just kind of testing the water to see if the board's interested, because it's early enough right now in 2018 where we could go and advertise and recruit participation. If you're not that interested and just looking for a straw poll, we would bring back those 12 and recommend that you reappoint them at the appropriate time. If you're interested, we'll start the recruitment process.
I think that's a good idea, to
Yep.
keep our 12 intact.
I'd be interested to know who's not interested in serving again, just
Yeah.
for curiosity's sake.
Yep, Sliv Carlson, used to be a former Deep Haven council member. I think, did I get the right city?
Woodland.
Woodland, I think.
Woodland.
Okay. Essentially retiring from kind of civic duty. And then Jackie DiGiacomo is, she was putting time into the CAC, working at home, and has gotten a job and doesn't really have the time. And so those are kind of the two people that are leaving and the reasons they've given.
So you're, just for clarity, you're saying we're going to drop the count by 2 and hold it 12?
That's what I'm asking for feedback on, but I think that it's,
Yep.
it kind of makes sense to me.
Seems like everyone's in agreement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next up, Arden Park. We had a mandatory pre-bid just yesterday, 15 potential prime bidders at the meeting, so that's good. We need a lot of competition on that project. And so the bid award's scheduled for November 15th. Telly and Darren, they have been invited to present at the Bowser Academy this year up at Breezy Point. They're going to be asked to present on the event planning based on the success of the 50th anniversary events that we ran last year. It's about 70 people registered, so that's some good exposure. The district always gets invited to present up at Bowser Academy, and so it's good for Telly and Darren to get some exposure up there. Telly is also presenting November 5th to the Minneapolis branch of the American Academy of University Women. Their theme that they're looking for is what people are doing and what people are doing what to improve water quality in the region. And to align with that theme, she's going to be talking about the work of the district and balanced urban ecology. Tiffany and Scott Stockhouse with the National Weather Service, they presented last week at the Water Resource Conference on our National Weather Service partnership for dam operations. Sounds like we got a lot of compliments from that technical crew on our partnership with National Weather Service and the success of flood mitigation during the last 3 years of record precipitation. We, I think Manager Shackleton covered the Nokomis groundwater meeting that happened just last night. I don't really have much to add there. And then as far as water level reports, the Nokomis Weir has been open since October 11th. Should be able to keep it open because there's just light rain in the forecast. We're down to 815.8. Minnetonka is right around runout 928.6, so we've got the discharge back down to 20 CFS, and we're right sort of where we need to be ahead of ISIN. With some of the rain that we've had, the Mooney Lake pump was turned on October 18th. Plymouth owns and operates those pumps because the lakes met the requirement for seasonal pumping to begin to kind of draw down ahead of spring. So there's some water level update for you there. We didn't get to this in committee, and permitting staff will send out some more information, but there's a fact sheet in front of you. This is a project you might remember from some time ago, the Minnehaha Park Area Regional Sewer Improvements, the Met Council force main project that crosses the creek upstream of Camp Coldwater. When this permit was originally considered in the original design, there was some concerns raised. Met Council's done a ton of community engagement, modified the design. They're really no longer into the underground rock formation that transmits water to Camp Coldwater, and they've changed a lot of the infrastructure. So they're mitigating some of those concerns. Staff will provide you a little bit more information at upcoming committee meetings, and we can expect to see a permit, I think, in front of the board sometime in December, either the 6th or the 13th.
Thank you.
Can I ask just a question?
You can, I'm not sure I'll answer it, but
Your annual review is coming up, so. Thank you.
well, then I'll do my best.
This is a sanitary sewer they're rehabbing?
Yes.
And this is not this is like an interceptor?
Yes.
The main one?
Yes.
Okay. And the, so it's nothing to do with groundwater? I mean, stormwater?
No.
Okay, good. Because we were going to do something in the Deer Pen?
Yeah, correct. So, yeah, this is an interceptor for sanitary waste.
Okay.
You know, there's obvious considerations that they make about the combined sewer overflow issues down in Minneapolis. You'll hear more about that. And they haven't had any issues down here despite all of the I&I issues in Minneapolis. Given all the rain, they haven't had any problems with this one. But it's not a storm sewer infrastructure project. There's no tie into the Deer Pen or stormwater work that we might want to link up with.
Thank you.
Ms. Manager Olson?
You said the word interceptor. Any news on the 44 interceptor project? Do we have an update?
I'll ask Mr. Meehan to provide me an update on that. I did touch base with Tom this week because I was convinced it would come up, but I haven't heard back. We waived Wank's conflict of interest to work with Met Council on the cleanup and remediation. Do you have a?
They're monitoring it right now. I haven't seen the recent monitoring data, but I know that they're not having any exceeds.
Great.
So I'll look to get a better update.
Have they got under the Halstead's Bay channel just fine? Okay.
We'll be sure to send up an update along with the Met Council one on that question.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Whisker. It would be appropriate now to have a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of conducting the third quarterly administrative performance review.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Shackleton, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone.